That's the breadcrumbs we really. You thought we'd lock the door. No, we
don't think so.
to throw in.
Good evening. The York County Zoning Board of Appeals is called to order. Our first item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. So hopefully each of you have had an opportunity to review the minutes. And if so, have you found anything that needs to be changed?
I make a motion to approve as is.
All right, motion to approve minutes, second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Abstained? Okay. Done. All right. So we have two cases on the agenda tonight. As we go through the cases, the staff will make a presentation. And do we have a slide? Here we go. Go back to the other one, please. First one. There we go. So just the order of how we present these presentations. Staff will make a presentation. The applicant will make their presentation. We'll have a public hearing for anybody else to want to speak about the request. Any additional comments from the applicant if warranted. And then we'll close the public hearing, open it up for the board for a motion to accept, deny, or defer. And then we'll discuss and then vote. All right, and we'll move on. All right, so our first case, Julie Carlson, Z21-35.
All right, Marion Ray, zoning planner for York County. First case tonight is a rear setback variance request from Julie Carlson. The property is 18 Old Fox Trail. The zoning is RC1, and they're requesting a variance from the rear setback. The rear setback is 25 feet, and they're requesting down to 17.3 feet. We have the zoning map here. It is in the River Hills subdivision. You can see the parcel outlined in red there. Backs up to the fairway. There's the parcel with the fairway showing. You can see that the T is to the top and the hole is actually to the bottom there. So this is the site plan for the setback variance. The blue is actually what is existing now. The red is the new deck and screened-in porch. The yellow gold color is the existing 25-foot setback. What's not shown on there is there's also a 30-foot easement onto the rear of the property that is maintained by the golf course. So the house probably intrudes into that 30-foot easement a little bit. But the new setback would be 17.3 feet. And you can see it does cross directly into the existing deck, does meet the current setback. We had some drone photos taken. This is the aerial directly above. You can see the little covered porch there for the screened-in area. The rear of the house from the golf course. This is actually facing north. And you can see the golf course in the back there. This is facing south, kind of along the fairway. And this is from the fairway looking directly at the house. And we went through the findings on this one. The extraordinary exceptional conditions, unfortunately, the existing home does have a non-standard orientation on the lot owing to the location of the fairway. Therefore, the existing deck and porch do not run parallel to the back property line. It's a little off kilter. So despite this orientation, the existing deck does meet the setbacks, but the area of the proposed addition would intrude in on that setback. It would not extrude on the setback if the same addition was put on the south end of the deck. So the full footprint of the proposed porch would fit within that setback if placed on the south end of the deck. So we find that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. Conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. If you look at the adjacent lots on Old Fox Trail, it appears the majority of the homes were built outside both the 25-foot required rear yard setback and that 30-foot easement. I went through and measured all the little neighbors to make sure. While most of these homes were built with regular site orientation, kind of perpendicular in their lot. Several are twisted a little bit, probably to get a better view of the fairway, a tee or a hole or anything like that. Therefore, the staff finds the variance for the 25-foot rear setback does not meet criteria. Because of these conditions, the application of this chapter would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. There is room on the south end of the deck to have the addition built on, so it does not meet this criteria. And substantial detriment to the neighbors or adjacent property owners. If they do build this addition in the area, it will partially block the view from the neighboring homes that do meet the setbacks. So we find it doesn't meet this criteria either. So we recommend denial based on all 4 criteria. They do not meet the unnecessary hardship. Do we have any questions for staff? I'll go back to the maybe. Jeff, can you go back to the site plan?
So when you say that you think there is room on the south side, can you just point out where that is?
The south side, the north is to the left and the south is to the right.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured, but I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Any other questions for staff?
Are you aware if, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, are you aware of any tree removals that'll be necessary for the new?
They should not have to remove trees
Okay.
for the addition.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The applicant, please come forward and please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Julie Carlson. I am the owner of the house. We purchased the house in middle of June, and in talking to the realtor and other people in the neighborhood, they thought that this was something that would be a great feature to the neighborhood and didn't think that it would, I guess, cause much detriment. And in the examples that I was given, they were pretty simply filled out, so I guess I didn't address everything that was found in the findings, but I'm going to address it now. Rather than go and build an accessory structure, which I believe is allowed in the setback within 5 feet of the property line, we would prefer to build something that is attached to the home. We believe that not only architecturally, but aesthetically, that is a better option for the neighborhood. As far as the orientation of the house goes, I don't believe that it was sited this way for a better view. In my opinion, the best view is down the middle of our property, which would have sited the house so that it was basically pointing at the angle. There were some huge trees that are no longer in existence at the corner of the carport that we just removed the stumps for. They were humongous. I don't know what kind of trees they were, but I guess that when the house was being built, I would assume that they wanted to keep them because I would too. So because our house is so heavily angled at this angle, there may be some homes that indeed are angled slightly for a view, but in our case, we're really stuck where you couldn't expand the house in a normal fashion. To the side of the home is where all of the HVAC equipment is, which ends up being a very extensive remodel if you're going to relocate all of that. The option to put it on the south side of the home was brought up because of all the trees that are being saved on this lot. It's very dark in that house on the south side of the home, which most people, I guess, would prefer to have sunlight coming into their home and natural light. By putting a screen porch on that side of the home, you'd basically be landlocking the main living area of the home. The other idea of putting it on the south side, I do believe that there are trees over there. It's also a shorter facade on the house. So I'm actually looking at putting a second-story addition on, or bump out on this house in order to make the roof lines aesthetically work. And I can only do that on the side of the house where the screen porch currently exists. So if I would put it on the right side, the south side that's being suggested, it aesthetically, architecturally, I'm not quite sure how it would work. And I certainly wouldn't be able to afford putting an extension over that room because it's not built that way. As far as other neighbors, like I said, there are probably some homes that are skewed slightly for views of the house and or of the golf course, and they're within the setback. But we do have evidence of a couple on the golf course on our hole that have been granted such permission. One being at 64 Honeysuckle I believe that was granted back in 2019, according to my paperwork. And as far as the views for the neighbors, in actuality, I think the neighbor to the, what would be on the screen to the right of us, so our front left neighbor, actually protrudes past our house because our house is so angled and set back. So if anything, she's blocking our view. And the house on the opposite side, because we're on the dogleg, they face a completely different direction. So I'm not sure how our extension of the porch would affect them. And finally, because we are on the golf course, if I were to extend this deck and not put a screen cover porch over it, I would fear for golf balls. I mean, we find them in our front yard, we find them in our backyard. I'm constantly out there helping people find their balls. I enjoy that aspect of it, but I definitely would want a relaxing place to sit in my backyard and at least feel safe. Do you have anything else?
No, I don't think I would add anything necessarily more technically to what my wife was saying. I think one of the things that we're trying to accomplish within the neighborhood, and I think a lot of people are doing within that River Hills neighborhood, because those homes were built in the early 70s to the early 80s. And so it's requiring improvements, not only to the lots themselves, but the structures of them as well. And so I think this is an important thing to keep in consideration as we continue to just enhance those homes and put money back into them. I think from just an investment standpoint, from a tax-paying revenue standpoint, those are certainly considerations to continue to increase the value of those homes by the types of improvements that we're asking for you guys to grant.
Would you state your name and address for the
Yeah, I'm
record?
sorry, Scott Carlson, 18 Old Fox Trail.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where are the white stakes, out of bound markers on your property? Are they on the property line? Are they further toward
yeah.
the
I
golf
believe
course?
they're on the
I don't have a
property line.
pointer, but they would be right where you're kind of seeing that black line that's kind of going,
Yeah,
The black line at the bottom?
on the bottom.
Okay.
That would probably be the closest out of bounds marker right there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you do have an approval letter from the golf course?
Yeah, both of the golf course, Ralph, I forgot Ralph's last name.
Eckert.
But what's that?
Rolf Eckert?
Yeah, them, and then the golf course superintendent, and of course the golf professional all met and gave their approval prior to us getting the approval from the HOA at River Hills as well. Those are the two steps before we come to you guys. And there were zero objections from any of those bodies.
All right. Any questions for the applicant?
I just have a quick, if we could go back to the pictures of the back of the house, because there was reference made that there was, HVAC, equipment where that south side is, and I wanted to see.
It's actually on the north side, so that's where we have
There it is.
the big side yard. That is our side yard right now. And it's been suggested that we could put an out structure out there or attached structure there, and that's where the HVAC is, so.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood that, but okay, I can see it now. So on the south side, there is no HVAC, there's really nothing impeding other than.
On the south side, yeah, you just have a different roof line. Like I said, I can't
Okay.
currently tie in what I want to this roof line, so we were going to bump out the extended gable in the back to be flush with the wall that you're looking at right there, and that would give me a flat surface to tie in the new pitched roof for the screen porch too.
Okay, and so with the proposed addition, none of those trees would be affected?
Correct. We're gonna build within the footprint of the house with the addition, and then the screen porch will be coming out just beyond, like 4 or 5 feet beyond the right side that you're seeing there, and then towards us by about 10 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And it wouldn't reach where that fire pit is?
No.
No,
Our plans there are to have a flat patio put in if we do that, just to continue with the improvement of the landscape itself.
I have a question. So when the plans were drawn up, and I'm sure you probably talked to whoever would build it, et cetera, were there discussions of show us both what it would look like on either side and what would prohibit us from doing it on the south versus the north? I guess I'm trying to drive to what are the real reasons why you don't want it on the south side, which apparently would have prevented you from even coming here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, the existing screen porch is where it is. It's right off the kitchen, which we essentially, the deck that's there now is only about 10 feet and it squeezes down because there's a bay window from the kitchen. So we have our patio furniture sitting on there right now, but you really can't use it. So our intention is to move that dining table into the porch, and having it right off the kitchen is advantageous. But as far as moving it to the south side, like I said, not only would it block, we have two big 6-foot doors that overlook that area and let all the light in. We would be essentially enclosing that by the screen porch, so we would no longer get that natural light from those windows. And also, like I mentioned, the roof line does not work.
There, that's a
as you
good
see.
picture, yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect view. So we have those two windows sitting there, and if you were to put a screen porch over that, with the windows and everything else on the roof line, you're gonna have to do something. And we're already planning for a 2nd-story expansion on the other side where the bedrooms are. On this side, there's nothing. There's just the rafters from the great room below.
So that tree there at the corner steps, feeding your way to?
No, all those trees,
If
I were to, yes.
If you were to
If
put
you
one
were
there,
to,
yes.
So if you really wanted to put it on this corner, you would have to build it off of that corner where the bush is. And essentially you have that big group of your trees there, and you would probably be impeding on the 3 that are in the foreground as well, just with the disturbance of putting in the footings and all of that.
And likely lose them with the, the excavation of anything around there, as you guys probably know.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one more question, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
So, on this drawing here,
Yes.
how far, there's a, I don't know if you can see what I'm
Yeah.
pointing at here. You got a picture of
You
that?
can probably put that back up on the screen. Yeah. There you go.
So, if you had to guess, what would you say that this, from the corner house to here is?
It's probably 5 feet at the most. So, I mean, I've looked at doing the porch at an angle, but you can't fit the dining table on there. It becomes just cost prohibitive to stay within the footback. And even if you did force that issue, now you're looking at a much more modern roof line where it cuts in at an angle, and it just wouldn't really match the style of the home. It looks like an addition. I'm a licensed architect, and I really believe fully in the aesthetics of it and keeping it, what it's meant to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so is anybody here to speak in favor of the application? Anybody here to speak against? Seeing none,
Quiet.
public hearing is closed. So looking for the board or a motion?
Make a motion to deny.
A motion to deny. Second? Second? Yeah, I second it. You were looking for one, right?
No, I don't know if you were asking for one or if you were giving.
I second the motion. All right. So we have a motion to deny. Discussion? Jeff, you want to?
As I've said in the past, I don't believe this is a setback issue, it's a lot size issue. When you have a house on 1/3 of an acre, you have to realize there isn't much you're gonna be able to do. And, you can't do anything about the lot size. The setback is a determined rule, makes it impossible to meet the 4 criteria, so it just doesn't comply.
Any other discussion? No? All right, have a motion to deny. All in favor of the denial, raise your right hand. All opposed to the? All right. All right. So the motion carries. All right, our next case, Z 2136, SS5 Prop Co.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Kirshner with the York County Zoning. Case number Z21-36, variance request. The applicant is Lev Sachs. Property location is two parcels. One's 3399 and 3409 Pleasant Road in Fort Mill Community. It was recently rezoned to Business Development 2 to allow for the proposed nursing memory care facility. The variance, the requested variance is from zoning code section 155.445, which is the off-street parking requirements for the facility, proposed memory care facility. Here's the zoning map showing the general area on Pleasant Road. The applicant is proposing to combine the two parcels, remove the houses and construct the facility. Here's the aerial. You can see the location, the existing houses. Here's the proposed site plan that came with the variance packet. You can see the 6 buildings proposed for the memory care facility. The proposed parking is sort of surrounding the facility. They're providing additional handicap spaces, proposing to provide additional handicap spaces kind of around the facility instead of having one centralized parking lot. And I have a zoom in of the parking requirements submitted with the variance request. If they had to do the full parking requirement for a nursing care facility, they may have to add an additional parking lot to make that in compliance, and that's one of the areas they could possibly place it. Right now, staff has been working with the applicant. Here's it's not gonna work for me. A zoom in of the parking requirements. What they're proposing is the code asks for 1 parking space, off-street parking, for every 1 bed at a nursing care facility. The applicant has requested in the variance a 0.7 parking spaces per bed, reasoning that, of course, they're gonna provide for staff and visitor parking, but most of the memory care tenants and patients are not gonna have their own vehicles. So they're proposing a total of 74 spaces in this design. Go back to the site plan. It doesn't kind of work. One of the things the staff has been working with them on is trying to preserve some trees, some open space, and some landscaping issues. And one of the concerns I did hear from the residents asking about the proposed variance was that the parking and the facility not be too visible from Pleasant Road. And with the proposed extra open space along Pleasant Road, that would be possible. But again, if they have to increase the parking, the reasoning is, they would have to kind of encroach in that area. Go through the variance approval criteria. A, there are extraordinary exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. The memory care patients do not require 1 parking space per bed, so the parking code requirement is excessive for this project, and staff finds the proposed variance meets this criteria. We agree with it. In this case, that memory care does not need to maybe meet the same parking standards other medical facilities. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. The request to reduce the parking for elder care facilities is particular to this type of business and does not apply to other property in this vicinity, and staff finds that the proposed variance does meet this criteria. We've had many of these variances before for other kind of senior care facilities. Obviously in the code update, we're actually going to address and have more flexibility with parking requirements and also have more definitions for continuing care facilities and not just be narrowed down to nursing care or assisted living. So it's something we're address with hopefully the recode update. But for right now, we've had other of these variances and they're kind of particular to these elder care facilities. There we go. C, because of these conditions, the application of this chapter to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The project, providing the number of parking spaces required by the code, will reduce the area available for open space, landscaping, and tree save as shown in the provided site plan. Because of this, staff finds the proposed variance does meet this criteria. Again, staff has been working, our landscape architect has been working with them on providing spaces for the residents, a courtyard, some tree save areas, some grand tree protection, increased buffer yards, and then again, kind of preserving the kind of, there's like a lawn, and go back to the, if I can go back to the aerial. Oops, there it is. You can kind of see right there. The existing house has kind of a lawn area and it kind of goes uphill. There's kind of a berm there, natural berm. And that area will be preserved with the proposal that they've submitted with this application and also what they've uploaded for review. So that's kind of the goal as far as what we're trying to preserve some open space. And obviously increasing the parking would impact that, could impact that. D, the authorization of the variance will not be a substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. The variance will not be a detriment to the adjacent property, and with 74 spaces and with the providing at the, what, you know, of course, having all the workers, you know, at the maximum shift, have their parking and guest parking, that adequate parking will be provided for staff and visitors if the variance is granted. Because of this, staff finds the proposed variance does meet this criteria. Staff recommendation. The zoning board of appeals may approve with conditions, with lot configuration standards, open space buffer requirements, impose restrictions, increase the typical development standards and the like, or deny the request. At this time, staff doesn't have any additional recommended conditions, but of course the board could always add conditions if you see fit. Because staff believes the variance request does meet all 4 criteria for unnecessary hardship, staff recommends approval of this variance, which is a variance to reduce the requirement of 1 parking space for each patient bed down to 0.7 spaces per each patient bed, plus 1 additional space for each shift employee shift.
Can you go back to the aerial
Yeah.
picture?
Okay.
Right
You
there.
have any questions?
Yeah, so 155-447 in the packet, references code 155-447. Says the reduction of off-street parking areas must be approved by the zoning board of appeals, so that's why we're here.
Right.
So 155-445 says if parking is not adequate after compliance with these regulations, because of other conditions associated with the operation of the business, the zoning department reserves the right to require additional parking spaces.
Right.
So do I read that correctly in that if we approve the variance and then later you find that there's people parking all over the place, there's not near enough spaces, that the zoning department can say you need to add more parking? Or is what we approve the locked-in number?
Good question.
That is a good question. I don't think we've had that come up before. If something was causing a nuisance, we could probably look at it from that standpoint. The way I've always seen that section was we have a minimum parking requirement that may not capture the actual impact of a use, or the use might kind of fall in between different kinds of parking requirements. And then staff could always increase the parking requirements. So say the code says you need 100 spaces. We could say, because of this use and because how many offices you have or whatever, we think you need 125. And the code does give staff that flexibility. It doesn't give staff currently the flexibility to reduce it under the minimum, and that's why it needs the variance. But as far as it becoming a nuisance later, I think it could be, maybe a code enforcement issue, but that would of course be down the line. And of course, we're talking about what's going to go on the site plan itself, which is still hasn't been reviewed. This is of course preliminary, and just trying to set what the standard for the parking is going to be for the site plan approval.
So one other question is, if in the time that I've been on the board previously, it seems like every memory care nursing home comes with this request, and none of them that I know have ever become an issue. But when I look at this one, it's a different kind of arrangement. The site plan's a bit different. And I didn't count them. I took for your word that there are 74 spaces there. It doesn't look like 74, but I say I didn't count them, but some of them are quite a distance from some of the buildings. You know, if I was to visit, I shouldn't say me, let's say someone that's going to visit someone in a care facility, may be mobility impaired, you know, they may be disabled themselves, and Building 5 doesn't appear to have parking within any reasonable distance. So is there anything that the staff looks at as far as the distance from parking to destination? Can it just be anywhere?
Isn't there an ADA requirement that there has to be a handicap spot within a certain distance of a building entrance?
We'd have to
There's
sort
one
of be able
right
to,
outside the entry.
Yeah, there's a few
parallel
parallels there, but it's very few. No.
we'd have to be able to zoom in there, but there's actually, and maybe I can kind of flip to here. This thing doesn't work. The minimum requirement for that many spaces, that's put 4. So yeah, they're proposing some additional ADA spaces, at least 4 of them. It's something we could look at where they even more ADA spaces. They are kind of spread around. It's kind of hard to see, but there are on different parts, kind of along the buildings. And it is something we have discussed with them in our meetings with them about having maybe additional ADA spaces in different areas, because I guess the concept is to have the buildings kind of a community and then have the parking surrounding instead of having one parking lot. But in that case, yeah, you do need to spread out the ADA spaces and the accessibility spaces. That would make sense.
Most people that visit these facilities are elderly themselves.
Right.
And there are parallel spots there, but I don't know. I don't like to parallel park, and I can't imagine when I'm 80, I'm gonna like it any better.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there is a site plan in for review that came in the other day. That's slightly changed from this. It's basically the same layout, same kind of concept as far as the open space along Pleasant, but it has more detail. So that might be addressed. I just can't remember it hasn't been reviewed yet, so I can't remember if there's a change in the ADA spaces. The overall spaces was proposed to be the same though. It still said 74.
Does staff have its own designated parking area?
I didn't remember seeing it on the plans. 'Cause like I said, I haven't looked at the, haven't reviewed the
my
new
question
plans,
is
but
if they
it
were
could
to-
have a staff parking lot and not take up the spaces next to the
Right,
building.
like if you're working in building 1, are you gonna park close to building 1, or do you actually have a designated area where they can, they might have to walk a little bit farther and open
Right.
up the spaces to, the visitors?
Yeah,
and-
we've had situations like that before. Like I said, with this project, the applicant asked for the reduction, so we knew what we were working with. So it's kind of, but the details could be hammered out, and that's something we could talk about, which is additional ADA spaces and possibly staff parking to allow the spaces that are along the sidewalk that surrounds the main area to be left for guests and possibly residents.
Would that be something you would suggest us if we decide to approve this, to use that as a condition, certain conditions, or do you think that would you would already?
I think it's something staff could work with them on.
Okay,
But if
okay.
you wanted to add as a condition, at least add it to be general, just so we have something to work with. Because obviously this is not necessarily the final.
Right,
final
that's
layout.
why I'm just,
If y'all will look at this one,
the
you
smaller
can
one?
actually see the spaces a little better. So like in building 6, there's 8 spaces.
What page is that,
The
Tony?
parking side, 44.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like there's 8 parking spaces and then there's 4 handicap spaces. The best my eyes can read, I don't have a magnifying glass. I believe that's 4 spaces of handicap. And then building 5, you have 5 or 6 or maybe 8.
5,
You talking about the parallel ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is some numbers on here, but.
Okay.
So how many beds are in each building?
How many beds does it say? It says,
12?
it's not working very well. So he says number of units, it's saying 72 beds. So it's not per building, that's overall.
So, under BD2, The parking requirement, is that across the board for BD2, or does that fluctuate a little bit
It's
with
by
what
the
type of
use, it's by the
By
type of
use.
use. If you look at in the packet where it has the chart under nursing home, and this is the closest type of use, nursing home. We don't have
Right.
memory care specifically, but nursing home. It has a table of off-street parking requirements, and this is the closest fit.
Gotcha.
And this is what we use for, I think, the other facilities that are not independent living, but they have assisted living, but also nursing care.
Seems
So,
like
and this is just for my own curiosity, if this building, say I mean, I really hope it does, but say the memory care thing didn't work out and they were to sell these buildings and it was to change use, but still under a BD2 zoning, would the parking requirements change with that, or is it kind of grandfathered in after that?
It would change if in the BD2 and the BD2 with the RICO will be probably an office district. It'll be, whatever best fits for the memory care, I guess. But if say right now BD2 is basically an office district, mostly allows office. So if these were to be converted to office, it would have to meet the standard at that time it was converted for office. And if it didn't have enough parking, then it would have to probably be added. But it'd be a new site plan, so.
Yeah. And it
What
seems
if
like
it-
there's plenty of green space if they needed to add. I mean, you take away green space, but it would be
But
doable.
what if it remained elderly care but not memory?
You mean like independent living? Or, I mean, because if
really
it
not
was,
independent.
it was just a different kind of nursing care, then it would
Different kind of
still-
nursing care, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
that's
it would
not a change,
still.
that's not a change of use. Would that trigger?
We don't think we would consider that a change of use. It's like and like. You'd have
Yeah,
to
so
change
it's
to
not a
something-
change of use, you're not gonna review the site plan again.
No, it's probably not gonna have to submit a new site plan just for a change of how the facility operates unless it impacts something that's relevant to the code, like the parking.
But going from memory care where you're not likely to have a car to maybe
Right.
some elderly care where you
Yeah,
could have a
it
car.
could, if it was not actually like just memory care, but it was still more of a assisted living, then yeah, that would be something we'd have to address because then you would bring into account that possibly per beds, the occupant would need a vehicle. But it would be a new site plan with that because it would be something that would impact a code issue. It would be something that's non-conforming.
Okay, so it would come back before you.
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
It seems like we've had, I know you've mentioned you've seen a couple of these. It seemed like we've seen at least one or two recently, but I don't know how applicable it was to this because I can't remember whether it was memory care or not. But it seemed it was in front of us for parking, but the question would be, is 0.7 comparable to other like facilities?
Right,
who've
and we
come
did
to
look
you?
at that. I did look at that. And the last one, I believe it was the last one that came in, was at, the board granted it at, of course, the employees parking. And I think there was some guest parking. And that was a mix of different care facilities, everything from independent to nursing care.
Yeah, I do remember.
But for the nursing care part of it, the beds part, the board granted it for one bedroom or one bed, 0.3. And then they also had some 2-bedroom facilities, assisted living, and the board granted it for 0.8 per bed or bedroom. So for a 2-bedroom, 0.8, for a 1-bedroom, 0.3. So this kind of goes in the middle of that, and it seems pretty comparable what we've seen before.
So what is the specific difference between memory care and a nursing home?
What now?
What is the difference between memory care and a nursing home? I mean, there's assisted living, there's memory care, there's nursing home, how is that criteria determined of what becomes a nursing home and what was memory care?
Yeah, the applicant could, I'm sure, speak about how the business operates better than I can. From our standpoint, I think we do have to look at it as just nursing care, just because that's what the code states. But in this particular case, the nursing care is supposed to be focused on memory care. This might be applicable if it was nursing care as well, but I think with memory care, you even have another level an applicant could get into if there's some kind of in the industry differences. But from our standpoint, it is nursing care, and we feel like some parking reduction is at least valid, at least what the applicant has submitted. Staff doesn't disagree. doesn't find anything to disagree with what they're proposing.
Any further questions from staff? Okay, thank you. Would the applicant please come forward, state your name and address?
Hello, my name is Lev Sachs, and I live in Charlotte, 5350 Pinehurst Park.
And you are in what relationship to this development? Sorry.
I am co-owner, my partner is my daughter, and I am a licensed administrator to run memory care facilities, and I'm going to be general contractor for this project.
Jeff, do you want to have your question posed as far as what the differences are
Yeah,
between?
If you could address that, I just curiosity.
Okay. The main difference between assisted living facility and nursing home is that assisted living facility considered to be non-skilled facility, and nursing facility is a skilled facility. When it comes to skilled versus non-skilled is having registered nurses in employment. People get to nursing home as a last resort where they need constant medical supervision, and medical staff has to be on board, and at least registered nurses who consider to be skilled. When it comes to memory care, it falls more under assisted living umbrella. If you go to most of the assisted living facilities, they have memory care units. They also call special care units. It's designated to people who are generally at later stage of memory care need. If we look generally on landscape of assisted living, and you look at residents over there, most of them have dementia already, but they're usually at early stage. There are 7 stages, so typically assisted living is from 1 to 4. When it's come to 5 and higher, people move to memory care facility, which has special design to prevent people from hurting themselves, more caregivers assigned, and more care needed. What we're building here is a memory care facility, special care units, and that's what we specialize in. And when we have similar homes right now in North Carolina, and they for 6 residents each. These houses are for 12 residents. We sort of implementing the same model of residential approach to the bigger facility. The main goal was if I would put a big box right in the middle of this property, and the cost of this would be probably half in terms of construction and care versus implementing this residential care service, which is give the best results when it comes to taking care of people who at a later stage of memory needs. The reason it brings much better clinical results because there are factors which are the most important for people with memory needs at the later stage is number of caregivers per residence. For example, in this facility, in each house, we're going to have 12 residents. It's going to look like pretty much a regular house, but each resident going to have their own private room, bed, and bathroom. It's going to have kitchen, like a regular house, pretty much. So when people with memory care needs, moving to residential setting, the outcome is much better. One of the biggest questions which families usually ask when they're moving their loved ones is transition. And transition, it's moving people to the facility. It's usually a very critical time. It takes from 1 week to a couple months. From our experience, it's pretty much takes no time. People move in day 2, they feel comfortable because majority of the people, they're moving from similar situation. They're moving from their private home to the place they can recognize and appreciate. So another part is number of caregivers. We have for one caregiver we have, we're going to have 4 residents. Just if you look at standards of any memory care facility, the best you can find according to standards, I don't know in South Carolina, but in North Carolina, which has very high standards, is 1 to 12. When it's come to assisted living, it's 1 to 18. And that's why people need much more stimulation, and the stimulation and communication and interactions, they come not from generally from other residents, because people in this stage of memory need, they sort of talk, when they even talk, they talk in different parallels, because people talk generally about themselves. And so only loved ones that can support the conversation by continuing asking questions. So if 2 people with memory care in stage 5, conversation doesn't go. But what we observe in our other places, they love to be in communal areas, but they just sit, observe, we have activities, but the main stimulation comes from caregivers. That's why we have so many caregivers. It's a completely different model that generally use big bucks. So when you're moving to residential, you want to move even further. You want to create great environment for people. You want to have space where they mingle together, go outside, have a lot of trees, environment. So if you look at for priority of what's important for people in this part of their 2-3 last years of their life, it's definitely not parking. They don't drive. None of them have license, none. So we need actually for residents, from practical point of view, we need 0 parking spots. But we put them just to be respectful and accommodate. And if we have to go further to create parkings, which we have already exceedingly too many, we'll just, what we're going to do, we just take from environment, we take from landscaping, from trees, from people who need it most. So, and the only logical place to put it will be along the Pleasant Road, and we're going to have, instead of landscaping, we have constantly empty parking lots. Probably I should start put a sign selling them. So, from practical point, we don't need parking.
So the main reason why I asked that question is in a nursing home, I'm surely no expert on the subject, but I would not expect that a nursing home resident, that a family member would come and check grandma out for the afternoon and take her somewhere. By the time they get in a nursing home, they're staying in the nursing home. But in an assisted living center, sometimes that does happen. So they can come and go.
Absolutely.
Does that happen in a memory care facility where Saturday, Sunday, maybe quite a few people are coming and they want to take grandma to get her hair done or something, and so there's a lot more traffic than there would be in a nursing home. Does this happen in a memory care facility?
It's a very good question. It does happen. But if you compare with assisted living facility where people would love to go to Starbucks, we do have occasionally this happening. But if you think about taking a person at stage 5 and higher somewhere, it's very often a challenge. When I just started like 3.5 years ago, I took somebody to select flowers for the deck, some of my residents. That was disaster because we went to Home Depot and it was total. Otherwise you wouldn't see, but from my perspective it was disaster because every corner become a danger. So when you ask me what people prefer, what's happening in real life in memory care, they would come because we have this residential, we have decks, we have landscaping. They come and they spend time over there. They bring lunch over there. So it does happen, but extremely rare.
So it's not uncommon for someone to come and I noticed in your application, there's a couple of places where you mention that there's extra stimulus because of the outdoor activities. So, you know, you go to a nursing home, you don't ever see anybody outside. Once you go in, you never come out.
Yeah.
But in this type facility, I think people would be much more like, you would have a lot more visitors if they can come and take a family member and even go into the courtyard and, you know, it's a more enjoyable time together. I mean, you know, they ought to visit in a nursing home, but the fact is people don't. But if it's a more engaging type visit, I think you would have a lot more traffic in this type facility than you would in a standard nursing home.
That's correct. I agree with that point, but I just can say from my experience and what I see, people do have visits. They usually limited the time. Over here is going to be obviously more because we have such great grounds. But what we start doing is probably triggered by COVID, and I don't see it's changing in foreseeable future. Our visits right now, we have a scheduling, so we don't have people coming in particular time. For example, when staff changing 3 or 4, no visits during lunches and so on. So what we do is schedule visits, so it's pretty much evenly spread. It's not anybody can come at any moment, unless it's emergency, obviously. But it's generally well-organized process of visits. And it started from COVID times. I don't see it's going away because I see it's much better for residents where people with memory care have a lot of anxiety. So when you have too many residents, visitors, it becomes overstimulation. You have completely opposite effect. So I will continue implementing it beyond COVID times of making it measured. But even if family visits and we have it scheduled during the day and considering people, I have members who visit their wives every day. And I have situation where they come once a month. So it's not like really loaded, it's pretty much spread. I personally comfortable that we have enough space because none of the residents need space. So if we're talking about 0.7, it means 70% has to come at the same time, which is unrealistic.
Unless
So we
you're,
covered.
unless you're talking about Thanksgiving or Christmas where multiple family members may come.
That's
Division.
correct. So it's actually a very good point. I would say the following: even during Christmas time, we schedule it between houses. We schedule a different time. Over here will become more part of our schedule. I don't foresee having Christmas party for everybody at the same time. We have to realize what we're offering is unique thing for people who are tried a lot of big boxes out there. So I have a lot of cooperation and trust from families. So a lot of things we implement, I practically never seen anybody saying no. If I recommend something like Christmas, 6 Christmases there, so it's going to be 6 Christmases. But I doubt I'll do it in one day. Because it's, when you do Christmas, you need more staff, so you're taking stuff from somebody else. So if I'll do it for 72 residents, it's going to be a disaster.
So you have control over who visits.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go back to the question about staff parking. Sounds like you've done, other facilities like this. Is there designated staff parking in one lot, or do they kind of go where their buildings are?
Actually, the way we have it's right now, we don't have 2 or 3 houses at the same location. They all separate locations. It's called residential facilities. But when you mention it, it's struck me as an excellent idea. Obviously, you want to keep accessible closer to the building too.
Sure.
And I definitely would like to implement it. I think
Especially,
it's-
and then the concern would be like when their shift changes, obviously you're gonna
yeah,
have
you
more.
want to do it further away. I
Right.
think it's a great idea. I love it.
And then just going back, when you said there's 12 residents per house, so are you looking at like 4 or 3 or 4
Caregiver?
caregivers
Yeah,
per
it's going to be
building?
3 caregivers and shift change. One caregiver will be changed, switching at 3 p.m. Another caregiver switching at 4 p.m.
Okay.
So
There's some
at this
consistency.
particular moment we have 4. That's why we calculated 6 by 4, 24 spots for caregivers.
Okay.
So there would be very few instances of overlap of employees. So say, for instance, I would think you would not want to leave the residents unattended.
Correct.
So if my shift starts at 4 and someone else ends at 4, in their potential, we are going to both be parked. They'll be already parking, and I'm going to come and need a parking space.
Correct. That's why we calculated 4 spaces per house. We need 3 caregivers and 1 person changing at 3, so we need 4 spots for a person who comes. And then we have another shift changing at 4, so by that time we have 3 and person comes, we have parking for them.
So basically the shifts are staggered, so they're not all changing over at the same time, so.
Right, it's also scheduled.
Right, okay, which gives it consistency and continuity, okay.
One question that doesn't deal with beds, but was there a grand tree study done?
Yes, and we're saving it right over there in front of building 1. And we're planting 130 trees.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else to speak for the application?
In favor?
In favor?
Would be
Come
me.
forward.
Good evening, Kevin Brackett, 1675 York Highway, York, South Carolina. I live across, that's my work address, I live across the street in the Bailiwick subdivision. And I just wanted to come here and tell you that the neighborhood is in support of this. We have been working with Lev from the beginning. Tom Odette, our councilman, has been there. We've had neighborhood meetings to discuss this back before even the plans were put in place. the issue of whether this was zoned. It wasn't zoned for a memory care unit, so that had to be dealt with first. We agreed to the zoning adjustment to allow for a memory care unit. It's a unique piece of property. It's been on the market. It was a house on it now and some buildings in the back. It was residential. And actually, between the bridges on Pleasant Road, they didn't allow for anything like this. It was supposed to be all residential, so this is kind of novel. And there was a lot of discussion about whether we should allow for something commercial to come in there, but it's really maybe the best use for this property. But as part of the discussion, when we were deciding whether to agree or not with the change in zoning, we discussed, as we were generally favorable, we understand the value of commercial development, and we certainly want to help this gentleman along if it doesn't hurt our interests. But as you come out of Bailiwick, you can see on the right across the street there, and there are other neighbors there as well. That portion, right, that's got landscaping across there, is like a berm that rises up. And one of the things that all the neighbors talked about was wanting to keep that in landscape, to keep it with the character of all the neighborhoods there, and there's several of them, to keep it as residential looking as possible. We like the fact that it's smaller houses, that's some, residential, but having that as an undeveloped sort of landscaped area, natural, and its berm, it rises up, it will actually help conceal the parking spaces behind it so you won't see as much. It's perfect for us, and we certainly support it. The neighborhood does, all the people that went in this, so we appreciate that. I'll just say parenthetically, I have personal experience with memory care units from my own family, from my wife's family. And I can tell you, that, and it's sad, there aren't a lot of visitors in memory care units. And it's understandable to some extent because a lot of these folks are lost to Alzheimer's or dementia. And in some cases, they don't even know you're there. So you want to be with them, but it's not like a meaningful, engaging conversation you're having. They don't even, like I said, it's sad. So if the visitors come, they hold their hand, they'll stay for a little while, but the resident isn't always getting anything out of it. It's more for the visitor than anybody else. So I've never seen in any of the facilities I've been in several between my family members, it's never been like jam-packed, even at the holidays. So I don't think that the slight decrease in parking when you have 20 to 25 staff there at any given time, 50 spaces for a 72-bed unit is gracious plenty. I don't think you'll ever have any issues with parking. My experience, I'm not an expert, but that's what I've seen. Any questions for me?
So you live in Bailiwick?
I do.
So when you're coming out, is that new entrance going to be an issue?
No.
The new entrance and exit for the new facility?
No, with the volume of folks that they have and the timing of the shift changes and all that sort of thing. I mean, Pleasant Road has a fair amount of traffic, but we considered that when we debated whether to agree to the variation in usage for the land from residential to commercial, and we did not think that the additional staff there was going to create any major crisis for traffic for us. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Anyone to speak against? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do you have a motion from the board?
Motion approved.
I'll second.
We have a motion.
Do we want to add any conditions to that, or do you not see that necessary? And we talked about ADA spaces, designated staff parking. If you don't think that's
I believe that's probably taken care of by some other requirement that they've got to meet.
okay.
As far as the staff parking, I think we're
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Motion to approve and second. Any further discussion?
My only concern is if the property changes hands and the use
I think
becomes more, but I think staff has said that
Right.
there's
Right.
mechanisms in place.
If the ownership, so it's approved and it's operational as a memory care facility,
even if it just changes ownership to another memory care facility, we will get a power letter that they'll have to submit a power letter in order to switch over the commercial meter. And they'll have to let us know that it's going to another memory care facility or another kind of nursing home facility, and then we can make a decision at that time if it needs for an upfit permit, does it need a new site plan? That's kind of our checks on businesses changing uses to things that maybe not comply with code.
Okay, that takes care of me.
Yeah, no, I agree with Mr. Brackett, having a family member with severe Alzheimer's, you know, if there's any concern over visiting and stuff, it is a very brief visit, and I just don't see that's gonna be an issue with the facility. I think it's a great use of the space, I think it's needed, I love the separate buildings, I think the smaller amount of residents in a building is definitely a benefit, and the ratio of caregivers to the residents is pretty awesome.
All right. All in favor of the variance, raise your right hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
I would like to say this. Tell your engineer next time when he submits something to make it clear. When we blow it up, we can read it.
All right, so, board, we have an executive session to attend.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Rachel.